It's been 21 years and 3 console generations since we had a complete Silent Hill game with both critical and commercial success and an overall positive reputation. In the time since Silent Hill 4's release in 2004, Silent Hill has been a franchise with immense marketability but no real direction, repeating the beats of past successes in bland, uninspired ways and being routinely beaten out of the limelight by competitor franchises. Konami has a beloved IP, but they didn't have a whole lot to do with it. There's been brief moments of brilliance. The PT demo in 2014 comes to mind. That's probably the most influential game to have never actually come out. And I'm sure most of the post-Silent Hill 4 games have their fans. I enjoy some of them, but we haven't had a game capture the magic of the PS2 era, and any defense of a post-Silent Hill 4 Silent Hill game is usually met with some amount of resistance. Silent Hill F is a game set up to disrupt this trend. It follows Bloober Team's Silent Hill 2 remake, which brought one of the classic games to a huge number of new fans, and an active part of its development focus was breaking free of the repetitive and boring nature of many of the prior games by trying something entirely new. Silent Hill F has a distinct identity divorced from repetitions of prior successes, and a central part of its marketing and development philosophy was a focus on highlighting a new direction for the slumbering giant. So, did it succeed in its aims? Did it revitalize Silent Hill? Well, today we're going to answer that question by going through the entire development process, the game, the plot, an analysis of all that, the reception, and come to an assessment of the game. In order to reach a conclusion, we need to look at every single facet of Silent Hill F, so let's get into it right away after this quick thank you to my ever brilliant channel members. Also, if you don't care about context and development, and just want a full explanation and analysis of the plot because it is kind of confusing, there's a timestamp on screen now. Okay, preamble aside, let's talk about it. Ryukishi 07 is a writer whose career in many ways mirrors Silent Hill. Much like the original Team Silent, Ryukishi was something of an underdog when he emerged onto the scene in the early noughties. Turned down from every single video game studio he applied to work for, Ryukishi did odd jobs in civil service, he did artwork for trading card games, and he did retail work, until finally he formed his own game development team alongside his brother and published Higurashi in 2002. This is his debut and the very first in the When They Cry series. Higurashi was an immediate success with global fan translations, critical acclaim, and mass market appeal, leading to it having novelizations, a manga adaptation, live-action films, live-action series, and several anime adaptations. Much like the original Silent Hill, Higurashi was a dark and deeply introspective game that massively exceeded the expectations of its relatively unknown development team. Again, like Team Silent, Ryukishi went on to have a brilliant early run, culminating in 2007's classic visual novel, Umeneko. Umeneko, like Higurashi, which it shares a series with, is a deeply psychological and downright visceral game with a few comedic moments. It's probably the perfect introduction to Ryukishi's writing style. Like modern-day indie darling and creator of channel staple Fear and Hunger, Miro Haverinen, Ryukishi is really happy to just disrupt his own miserable tone with dumb jokes at seemingly random intervals. When it's done well, it works brilliantly to juggle tension and immersion and comedy. When it's done badly, it's noticeably distracting. Whatever the case, following Umeneko, it seems like Ryukishi lost a lot of steam or just wasn't as inspired or motivated. Like post-Silent Hill 4 Konami, he had a lot of potential and an invested fan base, but he couldn't ever seem to deliver on the expectations that he had previously been repeatedly exceeding. Whilst he maintained a cult following in Japan, Westerners especially grew frustrated with Ryukishi. His most recent visual novel, 2023's Loopers, is the lowest rated key visual novel in the visual novel database. Ryukishi, like Silent Hill, was in a state of seemingly perpetual decline with only a few highlights when he signed on to lead the series in this new direction. He was a fan of the series already, so threw himself fully into trying to curate a game that he hoped would capture the magic of his memories playing Silent Hill. Of writing for Silent Hill F, Ryukishi said, "To this day, I remember the feeling of my first encounter with the strangling and oppressive atmosphere of Silent Hill. It deeply haunts me and it still utterly fascinates me. It's an honor to find myself involved with a series I have so many memories with. I've poured all my efforts into this story, so much so that I don't think I would mind if it was the last thing I ever wrote." In the past, when I was reached out to do some promotion for Silent Hill F, I was told a specific thing that Konami wanted to highlight was Ryukishi's involvement and how invested he was in telling a story that felt like Silent Hill, but also like something completely new. Both writer and series had something to prove to a world that basically considered them completely washed, and in order to regain a lot of lost faith, the game had to be something on par with Golden Age of both writer and franchise in the early noughties. Upon releasing the first trailers, the usual suspects got mad because the game didn't let you look up a teenage girl's skirt. But outside of this reception, people seem to have been cautiously optimistic. The same generally positive reception was true of the released gameplay footage, though even at this early juncture the game's greatest weakness was pretty evident. Silent Hill F has terrible, really bad, no good combat. Now this is true of every single Silent Hill game, but where it felt charming and novel on the PS2 games, the clunkiness feels sluggish and unresponsive to modern sensibilities. Some of the bosses in this game are just unresponsive slugfests. There's no heft behind anything, you're just standing still, punching a model. Combat and all systems associated with it, like the god-awful weapon durability, feel like complete afterthoughts. This is a shame because the game has compelling monster designs and interesting setups for encounters, but sometimes it feels like you're just smashing a pipe against their model for full minutes at a time, something that is especially pronounced for the boss fights. The game does get better when it gives you a permanent weapon that doesn't break and has some unique abilities, but this only makes me question, why did we bother in the first place? Half of the systems get abandoned halfway through the game. But again, this is nothing new. If you can struggle through Silent Hill 2's downright hostile game design, then you can manage this. Just don't go in expecting the fluidity of a modern ARPG because you won't get that. You're getting a clunky combat system on top of what is practically a puzzle game. The focus here, as with every prior Silent Hill game, is the story, doubly so because of Ryukishi's involvement. So how well did his style translate from visual novels to full-fledged AAA horror games? To answer this, let's go through the plot together, analyse the themes, compare it to classic Silent Hill, talk about what it does well, and then see how it measures up.
Why do you cling to this corrupt world?
Real quick, to see how this game works so well as a Silent Hill reboot, we need to understand what made classic Silent Hill so special. Ultimately, for a game to succeed as a Silent Hill game, the most important thing is atmosphere. The story should invite introspection, but hint at a wider occult mystery. The titular town should feel hostile, but also nostalgic. It should call to mind both fond memories, but also give the sense that horror lurks around every corner. The game should feel like a dream that slips in and out of nightmares. This is a series of contrasts, defined by both obscure mystical lore, but also quiet moments of intimacy. This atmosphere is at its best when it's accented by dreamlike and vague dialogue, horrifying monster designs, dreary soundscapes, and a focus on occult puzzles. This is true of all the classic 4 Silent Hill games. The game should also have a particular emphasis on the main character and their motivating desires. This is particularly true of James Sunderland in Silent Hill 2, but the Masons of 1 and 3 and Henry Townsend of The Room are all characters with clear motivations who we learn a lot about over the course of their respective games. All 4 of these characters have some kind of connection to the town or the mystery, so the setting informs their character. It is not enough to simply throw a boring, no-nonsense PS3 protagonist into a foggy town and call it a Silent Hill game. Homecoming and Downpour are evidence enough of this. The game must create a haunting atmosphere that feels relevant to its protagonist and supporting cast's respective struggles. Silent Hill at its best is a very intentional series. Its occult themes, monster design, personal character writing, and constant iteration upon the eponymous town all serve to make each installment feel unique and like a tailored experience that genuinely has something new to say. These are the criteria we're looking at to judge the story of Silent Hill F as a Silent Hill entry. Whilst I hate to dedicate significant runtime to recapping the plot of a game, this is a newer release and one a lot of people haven't played yet. On top of that, to get the most out of this game, you need to have an understanding of the story, not just its events and happenings, but also what it all means and the symbolism at play here. A lot of my argument for this being a good, if not great game, comes down to the story and how it's told. Spoilers ahead, this is not a substitute for playing the game, because to get the best experience you should play it yourself, but if you don't mind spoilers or have already played it, then let's go. For all its symbolism and confusing story beats, which will be covered, Silent Hill F is above all else a coming-of-age story. It's about finding yourself in a world that expects you to be something you're not, like a horrifying Mulan. Whilst it tackles its themes from the lens of a young girl who doesn't want to conform to expected ideals of femininity, the ideas here are universal to any kind of transgressive identity. The game tackles issues of acceptability, femininity, religion, substance abuse, and domestic abuse. In this game, you play as Hinako. In her own journal, she describes herself as such.
Me. There's not a single extraordinary thing about me, except maybe being tall for a girl my age. I used to be in the track and field club, which is probably why I'm better at sports than most girls. I guess I got used to running around a lot when I was a kid, since I preferred playing with boys. I admit, I can be quite stubborn at times. I don't like accepting things that other people decide for me, even if it's the right thing to do. More than once I've rebelled and made the wrong decision, only to regret it later. Unlike my sister Junko, who was always the golden child, I've been a handful ever since I was little. My parents told me that I never listened to a single word they said. I'd make my mom cry and my dad furious. But Junko was always there for me. She understood me. She looked out for me. That's why I love my sister, and have always done what she's asked of me. Or, at least I've tried. She would smooth things out between me and my parents, which made life in that house a little more bearable. That is, until she got married, of course.
Hinako is a tomboyish girl. She has a disdain for all things womanly, in part due to feeling like she lost her sister Junko after she got married, in part due to how unhappy her parents' marriage is. Both the first cutscene of the game and journal entries showcase how miserable her parents' relationship is, and how this affects her perception of the world. Of her father and men like him, she writes,
I used to think it was just my dad who was like this. But after listening to all the married women around here complain, every man seems just as bad. All their husbands are just as short-tempered, just as violent, just as useless, and do just as little to help out their wives. After learning this, every grumpy-looking old man in town I see reminds me of him.
This characterization of Hinako can be applied to a universal concept of not wanting to conform to expected societal roles, but is best understood in the context of Japan, the setting of the game. Silent Hill F takes place in the post-1945 Showa era, sometime between 1945 and 1989, likely sometime in the 1960s. To best understand this game's themes, we need to understand Japanese gender roles and the prevalence of misogyny in Japan. In 2020, incumbent party the LDP said that women could only appear at political conferences provided they do not speak. Even currently, lawmakers in Japan are only 10% female compared to a 25% global average, meaning women get far less say over their legal rights. In 2007, at the time Health Minister Hakuo Yanagisawa officially declared that women's role was childbearing machines, something that we'll see echoed in Silent Hill F's monster designs. It's not just male ministers who push this narrative. Female ministers like the LDP's Myuu Sugita share this sentiment. Again, as of 2020, Japan has the highest gender pay gap of any advanced economy, ranking 121st out of all 153 countries for equal pay. This is unlikely to change anytime soon either. Polling data from 2018 shows that only 4% of Japanese people would feel comfortable with a woman running their company. This sentiment was even more pronounced and vocal during the game's era, being the 1960s. 1960s Japan was an era of political unrest where post-war economic growth was on full display, but socially the nation was extremely tense. Society was extremely polarized, and there was a resurgence in the Japanese far right, with ideas of gender, race, sexuality, and nation all being rolled into one centralized belief. A great example of this is author Mishima Yukio's 1960 book, Patriotism, which showcases scenes of a murderous army lieutenant having sex with his wife beneath portraits of the imperial family, tying male strength, female complicity, and the concept of a strong imperial Japan all into one neat bow. Mishima was a huge fan of the Nazi Party, particularly Ernst Röhm, because he believed them to embody samurai masculinity, again showcasing masculinity, nationalism, and violence all being rolled into a singular concept. Many men of 1960s Japan who followed the example of Mishima largely defined themselves as men by how powerful and violent they felt they were compared to women. This increasing undercurrent of ultra-masculine nationalism and a strong emphasis on assigned societal roles is the backdrop to Silent Hill F.
私
Hinako is a tomboy who has no interest in marriage or her expected role. However, this is a setting wherein she has very little say or power to rebel against this expectation. In isolated rural Japan, where this hyper-masculine ideal was particularly pronounced, marriage was very much a transaction between powerful men who effectively purchased their brides and expected childbirthing machines and very little else. Hinako lives in the town of Ebisu-gaoka. The name is a joke at Hinako's family's expense. It translates to Ebisu's Hill. Ebisu is a god of luck and fishermen, so the implication is that the town is full of lucky fishermen, but Hinako's family are poor because her father's fishing business and restaurant failed. So whilst it's maintaining the hill from Silent Hill, the game passes up a more overt reference here so that Ryukishi can do some ironic humour. The game being named after a god also sows the seeds of the more divine mysteries going on in the background of the game. The town has a particular interest in the deity Inari-sama. Statues of this deity can be found everywhere throughout the game. Inari in our world is a multifaceted deity with highly personalized forms of worship, but is usually associated with foxes, prosperity, and fertility. So the town is not only very traditional, but is littered with fox symbolism, and the foxes symbolize traditionalism, wealth, and the female role as mothers and homemakers. We open with Hinako playing with a doll before cutting to her seeing her sister Junko, who has left home and gotten married already. Junko remains faceless. The emphasis is not her identity, but her traditional garments, representing how she is a wife before she is an individual. Women not having faces or having their faces obscured is a prominent design choice throughout this game, and it's an intentional visual shorthand for a lack of identity and agency. We then get a shot of Hinako's terrible home situation and one of her many arguments with her father, and then see her head off to meet her friends in town. The doll from the start of this segment reappears throughout the game, and it represents Hinako's childhood, as well as her rejection of feminine roles. Of it, she writes,
One day, I was told by a girl that I couldn't play house with the other girls because I also hung out with the boys. From that day on, I didn't want to play with the girls anymore, and so I threw the doll away.
For a short explanation of two major parts of the game, the doll represents Hinako's inner child, as well as rejecting femininity and pursuing her own interests, and the foxes represent traditional feminine roles and the existent power structure. Repeatedly, these symbols will be in conflict, and each time they represent these two aspects of our protagonist. Hinako's name can be translated as Ritual Doll, further cementing her ties to both the doll and rituals. Whilst headed out to meet her friend Shu, Hinako is called out to by her friend Sakuko. Sakuko is generally friendly, eager to come hang out, but she routinely refers to Hinako as a traitor. This is a bizarre dialogue choice right now, but it will make sense later. Sakuko's family look after a shrine that worships a tree god. This tree god represents an alternative belief to Inari-sama, and throughout the game we will see the two systems of belief in conflict. This is one of the most abstract parts of the game's story, so we'll dedicate some time to it later, probably when we get around to talking about subsequent playthroughs. Outside of the general store, Hinako meets up with her best friend Shu. Shu is a friendly young boy who Hinako likes because he's different to most Showa-era boys. Of him, she writes,
Shu's been my best friend since forever. He's my partner. We've been having playdates for as long as I can remember. When we play make-believe, Space Wars, we'd call each other partner. And for some reason, it just kind of stuck. Kids of the Showa era tend to look down on the other sex, but never Shu. When I rebelled against my parents because they told me to act like a girl, he was the one who understood my feelings the most and stood by me.
Shu is also from a family of pharmacists and has an encyclopedic knowledge of medicines and cures, with the journal reading,
Shu's knowledge of medicine rivals that of a veteran pharmacist. From ingredients, efficacy, to the medicine that best matches your body, you name it, and he'll be able to tell you. You can consult him with all those pains that come with growing up, like headaches to acne and just like that. He'll recommend you medicine and also give you advice on daily lifestyle choices. Rumor got around that listening to Shu's advice really does make acne go away, and now he's really popular with the girls. I suffer from frequent headaches, so Shu gets me medicine based on my symptoms, and it really helps out.
Shu gives Hinako some of this medicine in their first interaction in the game. He hands her some red capsules. The red capsules are strong painkillers. Your playthroughs after the first have their ending determined in part by red capsule usage. Hinako losing control of herself is associated with usage of these pills. It's likely that Shu is dosing her with an addictive painkiller, It's helping with her headaches, but it has an otherwise adverse effect on her psyche. This is in line with Shu's characterization, being someone who generally has good intentions, but also believes that he always knows best, even when he doesn't. These pills are made from hakokusu, which is a fictional flower, but it's extremely similar to the white Claudia flower used in earlier games as a hallucinogen in occult rituals. This is further evidence of Hinako's mental state being altered by drugs, and ties the game back to the works of Kaufman from the original Silent Hill, who used these drugs to help people see bizarre extra-dimensional creatures and cross over into another world. Exposure to these drugs causes strong hallucinations, as well as exposing one to occult powers. This game's supernatural happenings can be read as a sort of third eye open extraplanar drug trip. From this first interaction, we see that Hinako and Shu have a history. They use the nickname Aibu for each other, which means something like partner, sidekick, or close friend, but there's also some awkwardness. It's evident even from this first meeting that Shu has some amount of feelings for Hinako, but knows that she doesn't or will not reciprocate. The awkwardness is briefly halted by the arrival of the other two members of the friendship group, Sakuko, who we've already met, and Rinko. Rinko is a much more conventional girly girl with a crush on Shu and a thinly veiled contempt for Hinako. The group cracks some jokes between each other before the fog deepens and a strange red mist begins to creep through the town, immediately infecting and seemingly killing Sakuko as the rest of the group gets split up whilst running away. With the fog comes flowers, specifically red spider lilies or higanbana, which are a symbol of death and rebirth in Japanese culture and are common in funerary rites. The appearance of these flowers are the first hint that the game may take place in some kind of afterlife or rebirthing process, and its connection to death is cemented by their growth upon the now dead Sakuko. On her way to meet back up with the group, Hinako encounters the game's first enemy, the Kashimashi, a word that roughly translates to boisterous. Of these monsters, Hinako writes,
"A monster that appears to be lumps of flesh stitched together. It approaches with an unsettling smile when it catches sight of me. It's covered all over with sickening wounds. I wonder if it wants to hurt me the same way it was hurt."
As with Golden Age Silent Hill, the monster here tells us more about both setting and character. The Kashimashi is just a reinforcement of how Hinako views women, being scarred lumps of flesh that attack with kitchen knives, symbols of domestic life, who only wish to force the same harm they've been done onto younger women. This mirrors how Hinako feels about her mother, who she views as someone who is continuing this cycle. Again, their upper faces are obscured, robbing them of identity. Many of this game's monsters just reinforce the themes already established by this point, their insights into Hinako's fears around a loss of agency, her distrust of men, and her rejection of traditional ideas of femininity and motherhood. Making her way back to the store, Hinako recovers Sakuko's body and wraps it in a cloth whilst giving a short eulogy where she talks about how Sakuko always wanted to run a sweet shop, again showing how important people's individual dreams are to Hinako. However, there is some projection here. Hinako says that Sakuko never wanted to run the shrine that her family owns, but that isn't strictly true. Sakuko does take interest in her family's faith and does enjoy working at the shrine. This is shown through numerous clues. So there's a chance that Hinako is projecting some of her own beliefs onto the dead Sakuko. Hinako is a person who values freedom and individualism, so much so that she can't conceive of anyone else not holding these same values. Shortly after this, something comes through the door to the store and seemingly kills or knocks out Hinako, transporting her to a vast temple dedicated to Inari-sama. After making some offerings to the god, Hinako escapes the temple as the strange red mist returns and she meets Foxmask. Foxmask is a mysterious figure, but we can infer from our understanding of Inari-sama that his mask symbolizes a connection to traditionalism. The mask also showcases a link to the supernatural and the divine. Foxmask has clear connections to the mythical Kitsune, but like Inari-sama, Kitsune are multifaceted creatures with lots of different meanings, stories, and interpretations. The Zenko Kitsune are folkloric messengers of the gods and guardian spirits, fitting in with Foxmask's role of guiding Hinako. However, Nogitsune are malicious kitsune who deceive and seduce, and Foxmask can be read as either of these interpretations. Men with connections to kitsune, be it through intermarriage in the family or simply harbouring fox spirits in their home, have folkloric significance as key figures within their communities. In Lefkadio Hearn's Glimpses of Unfamiliar Japan, he writes, "Among men believed to have foxes, there are some who know how to turn the superstition to good account. The country folk, as a general rule, are afraid of giving offence to a kitsune mochi, lest he should send some of his invisible servants to take possession of them. Accordingly, certain kitsune mochi have obtained great ascendancy over the communities in which they live. In the town of Yanago, for example, there is a certain prosperous shonin whose will is almost law, and whose opinions are never opposed. He is basically the ruler of the place, and in a fair way of becoming a very wealthy man, all because he is thought to have foxes. This is relevant to the wider lore of Foxmask, as he is, in reality, one such kitsune mochi, a man in possession of a fox spirit that grants him power and wealth. This gives him great amounts of influence, both within the real town, where Inari-sama is the primary deity, but also within this new world. This is a hint to the game's wider occult lore, and the cult of Inari-sama's deeper purpose, but this doesn't become relevant until a third playthrough. This news setting, called the Dark Shrine, is very similar to the otherworld of other Silent Hill games. In the Doctor's Journal in Silent Hill 2, the otherworld is described as such. The potential for this illness exists in all people, and under the right circumstances, any man or woman would be driven, like him, to the other side. The other side perhaps may not be the best way to phrase it. After all, there's no wall between here and there. It lies on the borders where reality and unreality intersect. It is a place both close and distant. The otherworld throughout the series manifests differently depending on the protagonist. It's effectively a mindscape informed by the character who enters it, and has been present in the series since the very first game. Where for many characters this world is comprised of pure visceral bloody horror and industrial rusted aesthetics, Hinako's personalised nightmare is a world of tradition, filled with ancient shrines to a deity of fertility. In classic Silent Hill, the otherworld is also influenced by the Order, a cult, and in this instance it seems that the cult of Inari-sama has a similar dominion over the Dark Shrine. So it may not be Hinako's psyche, but rather the influence of this cult that gives the Dark Shrine its appearance. You can interpret this as you wish. I choose to believe the Dark Shrine is a representation of Hinako's mental state, as is evidenced by her comparing it to walking through her head, but I think its appearance, the rituals that take place within it, and most of the happenings during this segment of the plot are influenced by the cult of Inari-sama, who guide Hinako through this journey. She's travelling through her own thoughts and memories, but this journey is being influenced and guided to a specific endpoint by a cult that is influencing her. Like the otherworld, the Dark Shrine is not strictly real, but it also isn't entirely allegorical. It has a tangible impact on our world, it reflects reality, and actions taken here do have real world implications. This game is not entirely in Hinako's head, nor is it entirely a metaphor. To a degree you have to take this all literally. It's between reality and unreality. Hinako is journeying through her subconscious, but there is a real occult meddling here orchestrated by Foxmask and his cult, and everything done here has real world implications. Hinako is inducted into the Dark Shrine by completing some puzzles and doing some ceremonies before she collapses and wakes up back in the real world. From here, Hinako reunites with Shu, who reminisces on the past and their childhood, and the pair look for the missing Rinko. Approaching Rinko's house, Hinako gets into an encounter with the Aratabare, a large monster that is further proof of what we said earlier about how Hinako views men, particularly her father. Of this creature, the journal says,
"A giant, repulsive lump of flesh that is filled to the brim with a maniacal anger. It howls awfully as it swings its large knife in any which direction. Its unfettered anger is no different from that of a wild animal. No, it's far worse than that."
Hinako's father is a failed cook and fisherman who swings a knife whenever he gets angry. He also has anger issues. This monster is just a representation of that. I won't be doing this for every monster moving forwards, but just to reiterate here, every single creature is a reinforcement of themes. Along the way, Hinako solves a scarecrow puzzle that tells us more about the relationships between the group. It further explores the unrequited feelings Shu has towards Hinako, and that Rinko has towards Shu. Shu and Hinako reconnect with Rinko, whose hatred of Hinako explodes as she pushes her down the stairs, again seemingly killing or knocking out Hinako. Once again, after losing consciousness, Hinako wakes up in the Dark Shrine. In this new area, Hinako follows Foxmask and finds some interesting notes that hint at an obsession with Hinako. The assumption here is that Foxmask wrote these notes, and that his obsession with Hinako is a mirror of Rinko's obsession with Shu. The game's first major boss fight then occurs with a ghostly Miko that has the voice of Sakuko. Sakuko continues to call Hinako a traitor throughout this encounter. This might be a reference to how she allowed her to die, but this doesn't account for her earlier usage of the term, so the reasoning remains a mystery. After defeating this vision of her friend, Hinako meets up with Foxmask, who calls Sakuko a kagare, which means impurity or corruption. Again, there's double meaning here. Foxmask is guiding Hinako, he's curing her of dangerous impurities, and this is supported by the fact he has her undertake a Tamizu purification ritual following this fight. This is a ritual conducted in the Shinto faith to purify oneself before entering a temple. However, in turning her against her past friends and referring to them as impurities, Foxmask is further abstracting Hinako from her past life, further pulling her into a world where her only connection is him. Again, this is a character defined by duality. A major theme of this game is people being two different people depending on how you approach them. This Tamizu ritual is also potentially malicious in nature, as Hinako views the purifying water as boiling lava. Returning to the real world after this purification ritual, Hinako travels to her school with Shu and Rinko. We get more insights into the relationship between the sexes in the school through notes, and we learn about Rinko's obsession with Shu and hatred for Hinako. After exploring the school and gaining the keys to the mountain pass behind it, Hinako falls asleep and returns to the Dark Shrine, again being guided by Foxmask. Here, Hinako must kill or otherwise abandon her three childhood friends, again showcasing Foxmask's duplicitous nature. Hinako leaves Sakuko in the dark, which is her greatest fear. It symbolises being left alone with nobody to care about her. She drops Rinko into lava, outright killing her, and then she hangs Shu, as he accepts his fate and says he will respect her decision no matter what. Worth noting here is that whilst there are hostile enemies in each person's segment, the first encounter with the birthing monster is in Shu's segment. The birthing monster is an extremely unsubtle metaphor for motherhood, being little more than birthing machines for other monsters that cry in pain and misery. Again, this is what Japanese health ministers have said women literally are, even in the 21st century, so it might not seem like the most biting social commentary to us in the West, but it has a lot more relevancy in Japan. Hinako says she would rather die than turn into this, but this creature's presence in Shu's segment showcases that even if Hinako did end up with a guy like Shu, her fears and social expectations would persist, even if Shu didn't intend for that to be the case. Shu is a kind-hearted boy who does genuinely care about Hinako, but he can't change the fact of their dynamic. Hinako doesn't like Shu the same way he seems to like her, but on a subconscious level she understands that as the two grow older, their relationship can't stay the same. Her journal updates to read,
We've always had this unspoken rule that we shouldn't view each other as boys and girls. So we've always called each other partner growing up. But with time, our bodies slowly developed into that which we rejected. If I start viewing Shu as the man he's growing into, I feel like our precious relationship will come to an end, and the thought of losing him absolutely petrifies me. Shu is probably also starting to have the same thoughts as me, but he still treats me as his partner. I swear that I want to stay by Shu's side as his partner, and not in a romantic way either, but at the same time, there's some strange part of me that wants him to acknowledge me as a girl.
As Shu hangs, Foxmask reappears and tells Hinako it must be hard to say goodbye to her childhood friends, before beginning a series of sadistic rituals. Before this can happen, Hinako returns to town, heads to Shu's house, and gets attacked by the fog creature, which has a strange bestial arm. Back in the Dark Shrine, Foxmask's rituals begin. First, Hinako has her arm cut off and replaced with a beastly one, matching the creature that attacked her in the real world. Then she gets branded with the symbol on Foxmask's robes. Finally, her face is cut off and replaced with a fox mask. The removal of the face and replacement with a mask is more of the same symbolism we've seen before, women having their faces removed as a removal of agency. Hinako's branding is much the same, being marked with a family crest through a symbolic marriage with Foxmask. The arm is a bit more abstract, but also represents a loss of agency, as well as a split between the two facets of Hinako, the version represented by the doll that lives in the foggy town, and the version associated with Foxmask that lives in the Dark Shrine. In her journal, Hinako writes,
There exist two Hinakos inside me now. Shimizu Hinako, whom I have known since birth, and Hinako, a woman who's trying to steal my body from the old me. It's like an alien trying to take over me. If this were Space Wars, my partner should be coming to the rescue, but there's no sign of him.
The creature that attacked Hinako within the Foggy Town was the woman trying to steal her body, this more mature version of herself that has given in to social expectations, who now seeks to kill her inner child, in the same way she has killed the memories of her closest friends. Further looking to destroy her past self, the now bestial Hinako fights with a manifestation of Rinko, and it's at around this point that the game starts to make sense. Hinako has, at least symbolically, married Foxmask, and in doing so has split into two distinct entities. She is in conflict with herself, her inner child looking to save her friends and maintain her agency, whilst her future self looks to destroy her own past. This is why Sakuko calls her a traitor, because she has left home to get married. This is also why Rinko insists that Hinako is dead throughout the game. She is symbolically dead through the act of marriage. The Hinako of the Foggy Town is not the real-world counterpart of Hinako, but rather an abstract representation of Hinako's memories and her childhood desire for agency and freedom, dealing with the reality that is depicted through the Dark Shrine version of Hinako. This is further shown through the interactions between Hinako's childhood self and Junko, a representation of tradition. Junko remains faceless for the duration of the game, further showcasing a lack of agency. Beneath her mask, she is corpse-like, demonstrating how her life ended at marriage, something that is also conveyed by Rinko's repetition of Hinako being dead. And Junko's traditional garb further showcases her connections to societal expectations and tradition. Junko is not as subtle or multifaceted as Foxmask, however, and she is explicitly a dangerous guide to follow. When we finally get a proper look at Junko, she is wearing a Daitengu or Karasu Tengu mask, a folkloric creature said to be a prideful spirit that devours those it guides. Junko is Hinako's internal representation of tradition and marriage, yet with each appearance throughout the game, she has more ties to cruelty, lack of agency, and death. In the Foggy Town, we learn more about Hinako's engagement, as clues found in her family home showcase that her father made the arrangements for her marriage. There's a boss fight with Hinako's parents, who are then killed by the Dark Shrine version of Hinako, who continues to rampage through her memories and kill all connections to her past self. During a first playthrough, or any playthrough where a player makes use of the red capsules, we see Hinako attempt to regain agency and fight herself. The version of Hinako that represents her childhood self attacks her older, married self, now fully transformed into a creature called a Shiramuku, named for the wedding dress it wears. Hinako also attacks Junko and enters a drug-induced nightmare where she lashes out at the world, the symbolism of the red capsule slowly becoming more and more prevalent. The unreality of the shrine and the fog world fades away, and we are shown what actually happened. When confronting and contending with the reality of her marriage, Hinako's inner child and her current self clashed, and her childhood dependency on the psychoactive red capsules caused her to break. She kills 2 people at her wedding, and flees the scene before being apprehended by authorities. The entire game took place in the run-up to Hinako's wedding. The Dark Shrine was a place she entered due to a connection to the occult history of the town and her usage of the red capsules, and everything in the Foggy Town was a manifestation of her memories. Hinako in the Dark Shrine was the real, current Hinako, the Hinako accepting a loss of agency and coming to terms with her marriage, whilst reflecting back on her old life and attempting to kill her own memories to make her transition to womanhood less painful. So, Hinako was married off to Foxmask, who is in reality Tsuneki Kotoyuki, the heir to a wealthy family who developed an interest to Hinako from a young age after she saved a fox in a local park. We see this through a flashback. The entire game was largely a reflection of Hinako as she is on the day of her wedding, or the run-up to it, being the Dark Shrine version of Hinako. Her memories are represented by inner child Hinako, who we play as in the Foggy Town. This is why even at early junctures we have reality seep into the dream and cause anomalies, like Sakuko calling Hinako a traitor during their first meeting. The reality of this game is the Dark Shrine. The actual story takes place in the Dark Shrine. Everything else is just a manifestation of memories. Hinako has to try and forget her friends and family and marry a total stranger, living the subservient life Junko is representative of throughout the game. This is why the version of Hinako that becomes the Shiramuku is referred to as just Hinako, whilst the inner child retains her family name of Shimizu. The Shiramuku is a Hinako completely lost to tradition and subservience, in conflict with her tomboyish inner child, and driven by the memory of Junko, a representation of tradition and marriage. The first ending will always have Hinako try and take agency and physically overcome her fate, but Having had her mental state severely damaged by a dependency on the psychoactive red capsules, she lashes out in violence, killing several people before being arrested. This ending is somewhat unsatisfying, as it can come off as an all-in-the-head explanation of all of the game's oddities. However, there is more to the narrative here. This can only be explained by the changes that occur in New Game Plus. Upon starting a new game after getting the initial ending, we are shown more insights into the occult nature of the game, and the entire town has a number of subtle details added. Silent Hill F is not entirely metaphorical. Whilst you can play the game this way and conclude that the entire game is a metaphor for womanhood, substance abuse, and unwanted marriage, this is Silent Hill. There is genuine, real occult power at play within the town. Hinako's story is allegorical, yes, but it's also at points literal. If you refer back to the Silent Hill 2 Doctor's Note, it's reality and unreality coinciding. Upon restarting the game, Hinako can kick her habit, and when not using red capsules, the player is given a lot more agency in how they want to handle their fate. New items appear that grant new endings. Following the instructions of Foxmask and engaging in more purification rituals, purifying the newly available sacred sword weapon and obtaining the Agura no Hote-sama grants the Fox wedding ending. The Agura no Hote-sama is a flask containing what appears to be a liquid made from the same ingredients as red capsules and the Aglophotis of Silent Hill lore. This is a horrifying ending, as it's implied that the Agura is Foxmask drugging Hinako like Kaufman did the nurses of Silent Hill, and her torn off face protests that she doesn't want to be like her mother. This scene is pure horror, easily the most striking scene in the entire game. If you didn't get this ending, you missed out on probably the most effective bit of horror the game has to offer. Here, Hinako repeats the cycle. She abandons her agency and is trapped in a loveless and miserable marriage. In the game's good ending, Hinako defeats Foxmask, who shows his true form as a seven-tailed fox. This ending represents Hinako standing up for herself and rejecting his engagement, leaving with her friends and claiming her agency. However, after the credits roll, all of the geezers around the town explode, which is something I'll come back to in a second. She reclaims her agency, but the town gets destroyed. Only available after getting two previous endings is the game's true ending, which explains some of the game's more esoteric themes. Here, the two Hinakos speak with one another and decide to determine their own fate. This is the ending where we learn there is a genuine supernatural element. Hinako was a girl born with divine powers. This is why she was sought out by Foxmask, and why the marriage was proposed. His obsession with her is much more than lust. It's born of a real desire to maintain a hegemony of Inari. This is why she goes through all those cruel rituals, and why Foxmask is so obsessive about her, why he puts her through all of this. It seems pretty intense for just a marriage. There is an actual cult here. He is actually doing these rituals. This isn't just a metaphor for marriage. All of this is being done to appease a very real higher power within the town. Foxmask, like Hinako, is beholden to his strict parents and the society he's a part of. And only when the two have open dialogue and determine their own path together can they both reach a fair agreement, but also come to understand the higher powers at play. Remember way earlier when I said Sakuko came from a family of tree worshippers? Well, that's where this comes in. In the background of Silent Hill F, behind all the metaphors for marriage, is a genuine story of faith and deities jockeying for power over a small town. This town, like its sister town of Silent Hill, is a lot more than just a sleepy town. It's a place where the barrier between reality and unreality is exceptionally thin. As a result, there are routine natural disasters. This is hinted at through the game's various clues, and these disasters and supernatural happenings are kept in check by the ruling deities, first the tree, currently Inari. In defeating Foxmask but not having any understanding of the supernatural or replacing the ruling order with anything, Hinako dooms the town because she has viewed the story as entirely personal, rather than understanding the greater powers at play. Without a more benevolent entity like Inari managing the town, the dangerous forces kept at bay are allowed to roam free. This is why the gazers explode in the good ending. Like her narrative forebear, Alessa Gillespie, Hinako is an individual born with immense spiritual power who is targeted by a cult from a young age. Where the Order of Silent Hill believe in a nihilistic doomsday prophecy, wherein God will usher the chosen to paradise, the cult of Inari-sama believe in preservation of their hegemony and the cleansing of impurities. As is shown through Foxmask's ceremonies and dialogue, Hinako is intended to produce divine offspring for his family and cleanse impurities, such as the spirit of Sakuko, who represents an alternative belief system. Hinako doesn't just abandon her friends because they're representations of her past, she has to abandon them to ensure she has no ties to alternative beliefs. This is why Sakuko is the first person she has to kill in both dimensions. The misfortune of the town in Silent Hill F is said to come from a divine source, and Inari-sama is said to protect them from this misfortune. In this sense, the beings of the Dark Shrine, the rituals performed, these are all very real. They can be read as metaphors for a loss of agency, but there is also the real aspect that Hinako is genuinely performing purifying rituals to prevent monsters and disaster from destroying the town. You can't take all of it literally, but to an extent, yes, there is a genuine other world called the Dark Shrine. Yes, there is genuinely divine intervention in the plot. Yes, Foxmask does have a genuine belief that Hinako will preserve the town by marrying him. In this ending, Hinako contends with the divine. She defeats gods who are both literal and representations of tradition. Her reconciliation with her childhood self and moving forward is representative of both her reclamation of agency and her asserting herself over the cult of Inari and banishing the monstrous forces that reside just beyond material reality. So yes, Silent Hill F is a coming-of-age story. It's a metaphor for unhappy marriage and embracing femininity, but it's also a very real story about a magical girl going into an evil cultist dimension and fighting demons. It's a lot like Silent Hill 3 in this way. In fact, Hinako's story is very similar to Alessa's from the original games, to the point where I think it's kind of an intentional reboot of Silent Hill 1 and 3. She's born with divine powers and groomed by a cult and is set to be used purely as a means to an end for them, before potentially regaining some agency and setting off to chart her own course, being symbolically reborn, as is shown through her heavy relation with the Higambana flower. Like Heather Mason, Hinako must undergo a symbolic rebirth in order to fully contend with and defeat the cult within her town and achieve a peaceful ending for herself. So, to give a complete overview, the game, like Golden Age Silent Hill, is both a personal story of psychological horror and a cosmic tale of cults and eldritch influence. The game has numerous interpretations, and it's entirely up to a player how they want to take it. This is why I really enjoy the story of Silent Hill F. The story is driven by duality. There are numerous takes on every character, often highlighted by most characters having two unique variants of themselves. The story too can be understood through numerous lenses. You can read it whichever way you want. You and I may have completely different readings, and that's part of what makes it great. This is the story designed to have layers upon layers of meaning, reinforcing its central themes, from the folklore it pulls from, to the monster designs, to the numerous endings, to the dialogue being full of double meanings. The entire game is built to present a series of themes to a player, and have them interpret them in whichever way they wish. Okay, so cards on the table. This is a good, if not great, Silent Hill story. It explores the internal struggles of its main character in the same level of depth as the Golden Age games. It succeeds overwhelmingly as a character study, accented by strong monster design and writing, and clever use of symbolism to deepen the narrative. Like all good psychological horror, it rewards a player for paying attention. On top of this, there's a supernatural mystery for the most dedicated players to uncover that closely mirrors Silent Hill 1 and 3. The game has callbacks to older games for the most invested fans, but it breaks free from the constraints of the series and almost does a soft reboot, shifting the series' focus away from the Order and the town of Silent Hill, and instead presenting a broader perspective on the central ideas at the heart of the series. In taking the game away from Silent Hill, the game feels more like Silent Hill than pretty much every attempt the franchise has done since those Golden Age games. Whilst there is space for criticism in the delivery of the narrative, requiring the player to beat the game several times to actually understand the game is a big time sink, once you've immersed yourself in this story and really taken the time to internalize it, then I think it's one of the best I've experienced in recent memory. This story can seem very simple and on the nose, but when you peel back the layers, understand the context, begin to look for double meanings, start looking into the folklore it makes reference to, this is a game very much open to interpretation and discussion. If you only played this game once and determined it was a Carrie-esque, monstrous coming-of-age story, then I recommend you play it again and see what else it has to offer. As with all Golden Age Silent Hill games, this is a game that tells an extremely concise story with a lot of depth should you go looking for it. The game can be conceptual and esoteric, but it remains grounded in its themes and direction. Unlike games that throw a lot of lore and mystery at you with very little grounding, this is a story that can be approached and grasped easily, but with a complementary and optional level of depth. I'm not alone in this positive takeaway. With an 86 critic score and a 7 out of 10 from audiences according to Metacritic at the time of writing this, Silent Hill F is the best reviewed Silent Hill game in a long while. The game also sold really well, debuting at number 2 on the European charts and selling over 1 million copies in just a few weeks. So, it's doing well. The game is not perfect and it has detractors. I've already made my gripes with its incredibly flawed combat system known, but it's certainly the most fanfare the series has had in a while, and I feel that it's earned. As a longtime fan of the series who has spent the best part of a decade, even longer to be honest, in complete despair we would never get anything as good as we once had, I feel this to be a step in the right direction that understood the central themes of the series, but was also willing to try and do something new. In terms of story and theme, whilst I think it doesn't reach the same heights as 2 or 3, nor is it quite as nuanced, I feel Ryukishi had a clear goal in mind and executed it well. This game succeeds in everything it sets out to do, and I hope it heralds in a new era for both series and writer. Both Ryukishi and Konami showed a lot of integrity by being willing to commit to something so completely new and different to what fans would expect of them, and I feel this ought to be commended more, especially in the space of AAA games, which I often find to be very safe and stale in their execution. If more writers were given as much creative freedom over heavy hitter IPs as Ryukishi was given here, I feel it would bring about a wave of creativity not seen since the days of the PS2. Too often, I feel studios rest on their laurels and don't take the kinds of risk necessary to make something as bold as this. All things considered, though it isn't the best Silent Hill game, Silent Hill F is the best in a long time, and the precedent set by it alone is something that gives me a lot of hope. If the F in the title stood for 5, then I would be more than happy to take it as a mainline game. So, whilst I've done my research for this video and tried to point out as many subtleties as I found during my time with the game, there's no doubt things I've missed. What were some of your favourite little details in Silent Hill F? What were some themes you felt I missed or could have expanded on? This is a game that very much warrants discussion, so feel free to have some discussions down below, or just tell me I'm wrong. Thanks so much to everyone who helped with this video, and again to the channel members. I will see you all next time. Goodbye.